I'm Yoni Assia. I'm the CEO and founder of eToro. I was born and raised in Israel. I've always been passionate about both trading and capital markets as well as on technology. So I started sort of fell in love in capital markets relatively young, sort of even pre-high school. Started trading stocks. Loved basically technology, so I started programming when I was about 13. Then I became a programmer at the IDF, and I did my computer sciences and management be bachelor's degree in the Open University throughout building my first startup, which was CityRide, which was building video cameras on top of roller coasters. And then I did my master's in computer sciences at the IDC. And through the process of my master's, I started eToro together with my older brother, who comes from an industrial design background and always used to make fun of me that I have an accountant hobby, that I sit in front of charts and numbers and Excels. And the concept of building eToro. So eToro today is the largest social trading network in the world. We have over 14 million registered users from more than 100 different countries who can trade stocks, commodities, indices, currencies, and cryptocurrencies within a social network so everybody can actually see what everybody's trading, follow and get updated from top traders around the world, and actually use a technology which we've developed called copy trading to automatically copy top traders from all around the world.
It's interesting. So basically, it seems when you first came up with, eToro, so were you accountable for the back end, whereas your brother, took care of the UX design side of it, UI, and all of that side?
So sort of it. So I did a lot of the programming. I'm a bit proud and a bit ashamed that some of my code is still in production from 12 years ago. So I was actually developing trading systems and algorithms to trade the markets, not successfully enough. So I understood you really need to get very big volumes and very much sort of get directly the pipeline into the markets in order to sort of generate significant alpha. And so I was sort of building both the back end and a lot of the business concepts. And Ronen has always been sort of the product vision guy. So the
Okay.
design, so his background is industrial design, and he used to work on product design. We actually, when we were kids, he used to paint, and I used to sell his paintings in school. We used to build websites together, where I
So
did
what,
the
you never
coding
fought?
and he did the design.
You never fought? No rivalry between brothers? It's
I'll take it.
and about from what I understand, if I miss something, please excuse me. But it seemed from what I understand, so you started, you were always passionate about banking, trading, the financial market, and then you went to the military, and that's where you learned coding, right? The basic of coding,
No,
or no?
I was coding a bit before that. So my
Okay,
father was a CEO and a founder of a publicly trading company on Nasdaq, Magic Software, which actually builds tools for developers. So
okay.
relatively early on, I went and did Magic courses. So I learned to program on the language and platform that my father developed. Throughout the army service, I made it. It became my profession to be a
Yeah,
developer.
you honed the skill. And but then you said that you took another master. Was that master related to the financial services, or
No,
again was it a technical
computer sciences.
computer?
So
So you are self-taught on the.
yeah, I'm self-taught on the market. So I would generally say also when at eToro, when we think about like the big potential for eToro is a lot of the users on eToro are self-taught. So they're passionate about the markets, they're interested about the markets, but they haven't gone through the process of I'll move to New York or London and try to be a professional wealth manager or a professional banker. They just love the markets the same way that I did since I was 13. And they have great insights about companies that they track and companies that they use their products. I say a lot of times that the people that you can copy on eToro are to some extent better than professional portfolio managers because that's how they manage their own real money.
Yeah, and it's interesting. How much would you say education plays a role in eToro's success? Because I remember it must have been about 4 or 5 years ago that I downloaded eToro. Bear in mind, I had no clue about financial market or anything like that. But I remember after creating an account, I received a call, I think, from someone at eToro, and they were offering training. And I think you were the one delivering the training or there was some webinar. And I
Webinar, yeah.
remember and I remember being surprised about that. I think maybe it was 5 years. I don't remember exactly when it was, but eToro wasn't as big, at least that I knew, as now. Because then a couple of years later, I would go on the on taking the underground in London, and I would see the advert everywhere. So how much of a role that played in building
We
this huge community and
we view education as a big part of eToro, and part of it. So I would divide it into two. First of all, the concept of social trading, of you being able to come to a place and talk and communicate with hundreds of thousands of investors worldwide, ask them questions, go to the Google market page and be able to ask people, what do you think, is Google a right buy, it's a wrong buy? Go to the Bitcoin page and see what other people are doing. Go, or recently we've seen oil drop and sort of jump. Go there and see what other people are doing. I think the social element of enabling people from all around the world to communicate around financial assets, that's a very big part of education. And when you think about it, it's the best form of education. So we mentioned together we both have kids. That's the best way that kids learn how to talk, how to walk, what to do and what not to do is by observing either us as parents or their siblings. So basically, social is really the best way of learning what to do. Copy the top traders on eToro or copying the most successful people is obviously also a very key element in sort of social learning. Now, on top of that, we do understand that we want our users to to be familiar with all of the tools. So, eToro, we try to make everything as simple as possible to onboard to eToro. But the universe in eToro is a very wide universe. And
Mhm.
finance, actually, while a core value of eToro is simplicity, it's a very complex mission to simplify finance because finance is a
Complex?
complex world. So we try to create more and more tools for our users, and those tools sometimes require more training, more assistance. How do you pick the top traders? How do you invest in copy portfolios in eToro? And we provide both sort of automated or one-to-many assistance as well as one-on-one training to our bigger clients in order for them to really understand what's happening in the markets and how to use the eToro platform.
Yeah. And I think copying is also a strong form of education, especially if you look at the creative industry. I started out as a sound engineer. And when you want to learn something, you usually start by emulating as best as you can those that you like.
I learned in high school the best way to get grades is by copying from the best.
Yeah, that's surely is effective.
Yeah.
And I'm really curious because recently, uh, I mean, you're huge in the financial industry. Not only you've met with Warren Buffett, and everyone knows you basically within the industry and also outside. But when you started out, like when you started out as a startup, how did it feel? Do you have to chase down people, and try to share, your ideas? Was it hard to convince people of, this idea? Because at the end of the day, I think, if you,
Yeah.
eh,
I think so. When we started, nobody believed we can build a fintech company out of Israel. Now, this is 2006,
hmm,
2007. Remember, the term fintech didn't exist. So we were telling people we're building the next generation of E-Trade out of Israel, where the main differentiators are visualization, so a better UX,
Hmm.
and sort of the openness and social connectivity. These were very early days. This was when people still ask me whether Facebook is a fad, right? So this one was when people thought Facebook and social is something that might go away. So at that point, when we presented eToro, and it's quite interesting because eventually the people who invested in eToro in our first round of financing was a lot of other high-tech entrepreneur and VC investors, mostly, by the way, the owners of the VC funds in Israel. And all of the people that we went to that came from the banking industry, right? So the big players in the financial services industry, they were very clear. They told us there's zero chance for us to build a financial services company, a brokerage company out of Israel on the internet, that nobody will ever transfer serious money online without meeting the people, and nobody will ever transfer money to any firm outside of the UK or New York.
Yeah.
So, which is quite interesting because it's something very much related to, you know, how do you know when you have a good idea, or how do you need to react to people from the industry which you're trying to disrupt when they're telling you you are completely wrong. And surprisingly, people, if you're trying to disrupt an industry and people within that industry are telling you you're wrong, that's a very good signal that you might be right.
But it must
Because
also be very difficult. Like you
it,
must
it,
have been, no? Or you
it's,
didn't suffer from
it's
it?
very difficult. I think, I have a bit of a market reality sort of. I don't remember how exactly they say the term in the biography of Steve Jobs, but a lot of times entrepreneurs have these glasses, these pink glasses from which they see reality, that
Yeah.
enables them to sort of both see to a further horizon as well as to a bit disregard naysayers about what you're doing. And I think it's really a must when you're trying to build something and disrupt an industry. You have to understand that the reason there is a status quo is because there is a status quo, and because people within industries are locked in echo chambers, and that's exactly what you're trying to disrupt. I think luckily today, even more than 2007, and much, much more even than the early 80s and 90s when my father built his company, there are a lot of disruptors, right? There are a lot of people who are now investing in companies who understand the
Mhm.
nature of disruption.
Yeah, it's
And
almost more disrupt. Sorry, apologies.
no, no, go ahead, go ahead.
I'm saying it's almost more disruptive just going with traditional finance nowadays, almost than.
No, I think disruption is always evolving. So disruption is new players or new concepts that if you go to existing established ones, they'll tell you, that doesn't make sense. It won't work. That's not how my business works. But that's the nature of disruption, and disruption by nature disrupts existing
Yeah,
companies, existing professions, etc. So I think, and again, disruption and innovation are not exactly the same thing, but they're very much related.
I think this is very similar. I mean, it sounds to me very similar to what happened, with music labels and iTunes and Spotify. So, Major, when they saw the internet and Napster and all of that, they just sat on it. They just decided to keep selling CDs and physical mediums, and not adapt and use new distribution channels. And then Apple came by, and then Spotify, and one company was selling computer hardware, the other one just came out from nowhere and started, providing the distribution channel, and they lost a big chunk of the market because of that. Um, so no, I completely understand. But how
I
much of
think.
your sorry, what?
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
I have a question because how much of the fact that you and your brother alone were able to, have a working prototype played to your favor. Because I understand what you mean when you say that, okay, if you're a disruptor, you must disregard to an extent what naysayers say and what people that are already comfortable with their own system want to employ. But then I try to put myself, in your position, starting out a new company with such a revolutionary thinking, especially I think in relation to, because what you said, education is great, but when it comes to financial market, you're always scared about regulation as well, right? Because I can't give this advice because I might be liable to it. So, putting myself in your position when there was nothing of sort and try to implement it, I think I would have been very scared of people within the industry telling me that it wouldn't work if I wasn't able myself to implement a version. But if I had to, employ already a team, and it's a lot of
Yeah.
upfront investment.
So first of all, we had a third partner and a couple of early stage employees. So before we actually started raising money, we already had a working prototype. A part of that sort of my building, my brother's UX, our third co-founders, sort of back end development. One of the first employees was the guy who ran IT. This was back then when you wanted to do a demo, there was no cloud, right? No cloud, no blockchain, no term fintech. Early days of social. So we actually had a server in my bedroom connected to the internet, and then we went with a laptop that connected to that server. So we really had to build a mock-up version of what we wanted to build relatively early on to present it to investors. And I think also today I generally think a good team building something need to have those capabilities of showing that first alpha version or that MVP.
Yeah, and nowadays I think there are some tools like Figma, Sketch, those program on the cloud where you can just prototype apps and
Yeah,
webs very quickly and share it with everyone. So yeah, it's much easier than to do it at a time where I think also the internet connection must have been like pretty slow. And
yeah.
yeah, and so how did you went from financial market and this interest that you had about trading to implementing eToro, the first iterations. How how come blockchain? Of course, it's part of fintech, so I guess that you were always quite responsive to
Sure.
innovation within the financial sector. But blockchain and cryptocurrencies are kind of their own, like if you want, how
So
can I say, community, and there is the whole philosophy behind it. So when did you hear it first, and how did you become involved in it?
so I've been like there's three technologies that for me were really like aha moments or changed my perception on how things work or I looked at those technologies and said, wow. One is the internet.
Hmm.
So we're Generation Y, sort of the older part of Generation Y. But for us, the internet came in, I think, when we were like 13, 14, and you suddenly connected and connected to BBSs and to the entire world, and you felt, wow, I'm suddenly connected to every single place in the world, to all of the information is in my fingertips. And I think that for me was like a real aha moment of something that's super disruptive that led me to eventually become a part of trading and investing because I love the concept of investing and trading throughout the dot com bubble. So 97, 98, 99 was really when the market started looking at the internet and technology and saying, wow, we're seeing 10x returns, 20x returns. And I think my first trade when I started trading and you understood that I'm sitting in a house in Israel clicking a trade and that somehow gets routed into the stock exchange in the US and then reported to a blotter in Yahoo groups and everything connects. I think that's also sort of the I love capital markets and how capital markets and money markets connect everything around the world. It's like a constant butterfly effect. So if you kick a ball in your house, with your kid, there's no real butterfly effect to it, right? So maybe there could be a very extensive one if the ball hits a tree with the bat and then you
The
eat the bat
painting.
and I'm in a desert room. But generally there aren't a lot of butterfly effects in the regular day to day. But when you think about capital markets, every investment you make, every money movement has this insane butterfly effect of you're buying a shoe, that shoe was manufactured in China, that company is public or not public, you pay it with dollars, they get paid in yuan. So this complexity of the entire financial services and capital markets world really, really sort of becomes something that I think are magnificent. And then I founded eToro, and the 2008 financial crisis came. And what I realized then is I was in love in the concept of capital markets and financial markets, but they actually really don't work. And they're completely broken. And when when you start a fintech company before the concept of fintech is really sort of known to people, and I started connecting to all of the different banks and liquidity providers and understanding how currency exchange works, then you get this aha moment that wow, this entire financial services industry really has a technology that has been built in the 80s and the 90s. And the internet, which is an amazing technology, still really hasn't adapted itself, or financial services really hasn't adapted yet to the internet. So if you think about the banking ecosystem, a lot of the core systems have been written in the 80s and the 90s. Everything in the banking system is based on reconciliation once a day, or sometimes settlement in T plus two. So when you come from the technology of the internet, which everything is in real time, everything is in access, and you look at capital markets at the macro and you're saying, wow, amazing, everything is supposed to work there. And then as an entrepreneur, I was suddenly amazed to see that nothing actually is really connected in capital markets.
Mm-hmm.
And when I started looking at Bitcoin, this was 2 years after I actually wrote a paper called The Good Dollar on the need for basically, I called it a transparent money system. So you could actually see all of the transactions of all of the people, and people can actually know who they're transacting with and see the history of all of those transactions. And I said that this is needed. This was in 2008 because you want money to represent something good. You want to disable people from working with money in a way that has no consequence, and for everything to be more interconnected. And then when I saw Bitcoin in 2010, this was for me like, wow, this is how finance should work. Like I started buying Bitcoin for eToro. I started paying programmers on the internet with Bitcoin. And I said, wow, this is 100% the future of money, where everybody's using the same ledger, the same blockchain, and everybody can trust the fact that that they receive the money, and everything is semi real time. So that's really when I sort of went into crypto. I'm one of the very big believers in the future of blockchain as a paradigm shift for financial services. We started working on the concept of colored coins, which is tokenization of real world assets like euro dollars and yens back in 2012. That project eventually sort of forked to a lot of different projects, Ethereum being one of them.
Mm-hmm.
We spun off what we did in eToro there, which spun off to another company called Kolu, which is also Gibraltar based. So we were very early on. And again, these cycles of significant paradigm shift in technology, they take a long period of time. Consumer disruption potentially is very fast, right? So a game going viral, you can get a game with 100 million users very fast.
Can
People,
I ask you one thing about, because you mentioned game, uh, and you just mentioned. So I don't want to move too far ahead from what you just said. So that's why I interrupt you a moment, because you mentioned using the blockchain to entice with real world asset, right? Now I think there is another technology, and I would like your opinion on that. I think the blockchain could become even and perhaps more relevant in transferring digital value, which before the blockchain, doesn't really bear much value, because at the end of the day, any and you're a programmer, so probably what I'm about to say is going to sound like blasphemy to you, but like to the everyday user, I see, okay, there is a picture, of course, there is an intellectual property covering it, but you can copy and paste that picture, so the value is very volatile, right? Whereas what I understand, I've studied, I've specialized in intellectual property law. So when I saw the blockchain and I understood the type of problems that it solves within, for example, a digital currency like Bitcoin, that can be applied, in my opinion, to any other form of virtual ownership, and what it can, a virtual asset. And what it does, it gives it a story, it gives it a narrative, and so each item is unique. You can't copy and paste the same item. It's one of a kind.
So definitely, there has been a lot of discussion of the usage of blockchain in what's called DRM, digital rights management,
Mm-hmm.
and it ranges from digital goods to potentially, if there was like a blockchain of music, somebody could actually know who's listening to the music everywhere. Now, I think one of the bigger barriers, and again, there's two sort of different lines of thought, or three, in blockchain and crypto. One is the core Bitcoin one, which is now talking about a digital store of value, right?
Mm-hmm.
Digital gold.
Yeah.
That is a macroeconomic discussion around the concept of building sound money on the internet, which cannot be inflated as regular assets or regular fiat currencies. And that led to a very interesting dialogue all around the world around who has the right to print money, how do governments print money, what is the value of money. And I think we're at the probably we probably have the most amount of people in the world right now talking about the concept of money, the theory of money, than ever before in history, which I think is amazing, because I would call myself an amateur economist as well. So I love these concepts. I love reading Keynes and Adam Smith and Marx. So we're really seeing an influx in the interest of the actual creation of money. And that's one line, sort of one part of the philosophy of
Mm-hmm.
crypto. The other one is around blockchain and its interface with smart contracts, where potentially smart contracts can replace legal contracts.
Mm-hmm.
The problem with that is that we don't really have an infrastructure in the legal work to glue that together, and that is something that I think will still take a while. So I think whether the ICO sort of entire rally from 2017 to 2018, where people raised insane amounts of money, is it a great example of how potentially this technology can work? Yes, but it also showed the weakness of that technology, which was it doesn't connect to the traditional legal system. So,
Mm-hmm.
so you can't enforce anything, and therefore there was a lot of fraud and a lot of misperception and very little regulation, which eventually led regulators all around the world develop too much regulation, so there's now no ICOs anymore. So, and there was a very, very quick cycle.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it will still take time for the traditional systems, both the monetary systems as well as legal systems, to understand how to either embed these technologies into them, or get replaced by these technologies.
And you mentioned the first part of these two currents of thinking. I think within crypto, the first one was that, of course, if you take an assets like Bitcoin, correct, that it's capped, so you wouldn't be able to have inflation in the traditional sense, because no one would be able to print more than that number that has been predefined. But then my question to that is, how do you think that inflation would be expressed? Because to become a unit of account, that means that people would have to to use it worldwide. But if the value is capped, then each single unit would go up in value. So would that be just a different?
It's a philosophical question on sort of the three traits of money a store of value, right?
Yeah.
There's no doubt Bitcoin can act as an efficient store of value. It's medium of exchange.
Yeah.
That's part of the built-in technology of Bitcoin. And there's unit of account. Regarding unit of account, the way I view it is my question to you is if you go to any store, any restaurant in the world, and you see something priced in shekels or dollars or euros and yens, can you immediately translate that into in Bitcoin terms? Of
No.
course,
No.
of
No.
course, there's real-time prices anywhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
In theory, you could go with your phone and look at any price in any currency. I can probably write that up relatively simple and do like this with your phone and ask how much is it in Bitcoin. I'll return to you a number, right? So
Yes.
it's a unit. Nobody said that the unit of account needs to be something that's fixed, that's not volatile. It just needs to be it needs to be useful. So in any case, if you have a Bitcoin wallet and you know at any given time how much anything at any currency price can be sold to you, then it acts as a unit of account. So I'm adding basically a technology layer around
Okay.
it. So if it's always priced to all of the rest, then you can do it. So, and I can say, by the way, in shekels, you don't shekels, for example, don't necessarily act as unit of account because if you're now in the UK and you have 200 shekels in your pocket or 200 Nigerians naira or 200 South African rands and you want to buy something in a store, you won't necessarily be able to convert those that easily. Now, again, obviously, in exchanges, you can exchange it. There's a very significant gap, etc., etc. So I think Bitcoin acts at least as a unit of account as any of the traditional other fiat currencies for you.
See, it makes sense. And what about the third technology? Because you said Internet of Things, blockchain, and you said that you've seen three technologies that really that were.
The capital markets, so stock
Okay, okay,
options.
okay. And then I have a question for you because I like to, also try and envision how the future will look like, not with respect to the financial market usually, but I wanted to ask you about augmented reality because I believe that when mixed reality reaches, a level of when adoption of a mixed reality is not cumbersome as going around with basically a headset which is like the helmet of a scooter that could replace potentially any screen, the need for a mobile phone. It would just be everything would be it would be a new
Yeah,
interface. So I guess your brother is probably very excited
yeah.
about these technologies, the UX.
So I love the concept of augmented reality,
Hmm.
but I haven't seen anything sort of very good UX point of view. But by the way, the biggest problem is where do you put the battery here, right?
Yeah.
So there's still some technology gap. But I think I even tried taking some developers to develop for me something which is super 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 makes sense. Like when I go around and meet people, I really need my glasses to tell me who they are because in a lot of cases I probably met them before. I have their picture on LinkedIn. I just need to cross reference that, tell me who is that guy, when did I meet him last, what did we talk about, and that's super super useful information, right?
Yeah.
The same as translation. So looking at your head and you're talking to me with in one language, and I can effectively see either subtitles or hear you in another language with subtitles. Super super efficient. Definitely will make the world flatter. And I'm one of those who believe that a flatter world, a more global world, is a better world.
Yeah, I agree with
Um,
that.
when are we going to see it? Peter Thiel, in his book Zero to One,
Yeah, of course.
says something very interesting. If you look at sci-fi movies from the 50s, and then you compare them to what we have today, you'll find out that a lot of what they thought would be in the future, right, that 70 years, still hasn't arrived. Most people in the 50s would assume I'd have a robot now bringing me an espresso.
Yes.
And by the way, it's not that you can't build a robot for me
Exactly.
to bring me an espresso. It's that the markets don't necessarily meet the supply and demand to give the to give us the future that we need. And that's again why I love capital markets. And someone told me that regarding AI. He told me, "What if I would tell you to describe AI?" And it was a group of people. I brought a lecturer to eToro who's an expert in AI, but not AI like machine learning and what everybody does, like real trying to really build a human sort of
Response and brain and
interface.
yeah.
And then we got to this definition of AI, and he calls it God, and it's basically like, it's actually now sounds a bit like Google, but any answer, any question you have, you ask him, and he will give you the best possible answer. And is that a technology that you'd want? And everybody would say yes. And then you ask, okay, so is it plausible to make this? And the answer is also probably yes. Why haven't anybody built it then? And then the answer is because there isn't an efficient business model for it, or more correctly, still the entrepreneur to find the business model to develop this at scale hasn't done it yet. So when we think about things like augmented reality, the only thing is like the obvious things when you think about them in 10 years,
Mhm.
it's actually quite interesting because on in the 90s you could have thought about VR and augmented reality sort of just around the corner, but 30 years now passed and it's still not around the corner. So it's not a question necessarily of technology, it's a question of does does the entrepreneur building the product using the technology find the right product market fit and business model to scale it to everyday use, which is a completely different question.
I agree with you 1,000,000%. And I think social, what those movies in the 50s, though, failed to envision was a social change like the one that happened. Because, yes, of course, they envisioned like flying cars and teleports and all of that, which didn't happen yet, or to an extent has, but again, it has not been adopted yet. But then they've not been able to envision how massively society would have changed. Every time a new app like Snapchat or TikTok, comes around, okay, it's not a massive change within the grain of culture, but I think it's a little bit and it's incremental. So every time society changes massively. So I
It's a
think there has been a lot of change actually in the past 20 years since I was a kid.
There's no doubt that we've seen enormous amounts of change. And by the way, change is also accelerating. And the reason change is accelerating is because Silicon Valley mentality and sort of also, the Silicon Valley mentality in Israel,
Like,
and generally, all of the ecosystem of VCs, disruption, innovation, technology, it's all around constantly changing and constantly creating change. And the people who build these companies are experts in change management and innovation management
mhm.
and disruption, right? Because if you build a company that grew from one employee to 1,000 employees, you are very well sort of trained to grow from 1,000 employees to 10,000 employees. If you grew your company from 1,000 users to 500,000 users, you're very well trained in your thinking how to build now something that can handle 50 million users. So it's a very very agile and stretchable industry with usually the people on top being disruptors themselves, and even the core business practices. We, for example, learned a lot from the business practices of the likes of Google and Facebook and Twitter, which is constantly look at what your users are doing, the features that you're using, throw out features that they're not using. So don't waste any more time on those features if nobody's using them, and the ones that users use the most, iterate on them, build on them more, scale them. And that, in essence, that is very different than trying to extract, and which is the traditional business model, try to extract as much money as possible,
Yeah.
right? So try to extract as much money as possible, especially in financial services. You would look at all of your users and you'd say, hey, 10% of our users are generating 80% of my income. Let's get rid of all the rest of the users. They're not relevant, which is basically what happens in wealth management and investment banking and all of the big players. You know, if you want a Goldman Sachs wealth management account, you need minimum $5 million. If you raise money with JP Morgan, you need to raise at least $200 million. So the top of the top in the old world always increase their threshold, while the top of the top in the tech world always try to cater to as many people as possible. And that's a very, very different state of mind that's in the heart of consumer fintech.
I love this rule. It's almost like a rule of physics. I really like it. What about, so your approach seems also very user centric. So it's almost like a UX approach in the philosophy of how you iterate and you take new design.
Yeah.
So um, moving on, I wanted to ask you, so for example, we went on what are the technology, what you think about augmented reality. What's next? What do you think is next for you, for eToro? What's
So we're very excited about global expansion. We're expanding more and more into the US. So at core, we started very European centric, UK, Italy, Spain, Germany, France, and have expanded significantly into Asia, from China to Australia to all of the different regions in Southeast Asia. And we're now expanding into the US, which is very exciting to us. We're building new products, so we're expanding our offering to enable our users to actually eventually not only use us for investments, but also for the more traditional banking needs that they have or money needs that they have. So we want to offer more products and services to our users to be able to basically be the place for them to manage their investments. We believe that the opportunity here, so when I manage some of my funds outside of eToro, I'm extremely frustrated by the UX and by the fact that still some banks don't have a good mobile app. And you don't get real time ability to see what's happening in your account. So I think there's a very big gap between users' expectations of what do they want out of fintech, how do they want to manage their money, and the existing sort of incumbents, banks, etc. And that opportunity is in the hundreds of billions. It's in the trillions of dollars or more in the amount of money that is going to move from old technologies to new technologies. It's in the range of hundreds of billions of dollars in market cap for the companies who will succeed to capture that audience and let that audience grow with them. So if we're able to build a global digital investment platform for the new generations who want to invest in a social network. They want to invest globally, not locally. They want to copy top traders from all around the world and portfolios which are global in nature. Then eventually local players will find it very hard to compete with us.
And how different is your product? I mean, if any, are there differences? Are you designing different products based on the geographical area you're offering it?
Yes,
So do you see that you add? Okay.
every yeah, every a big part of also the difference between fintech 1.0 or sort of the e-trade revolution and now what we're just doing and disrupting the market is the fact that we're a global platform which can be personalized based on where you open the account. So if you're in the UK, you'd open account in the UK, you'd see UK stocks. If you're in Germany, you'd see German stocks. If you're in Australia, you'd see more Australian assets and you'd be onboarded to our Australian broker. In the US, you've obviously will be onboarded to our US platform, which today supports only crypto in the US. We're about to also launch and build our stock trading platform. So part of our ability to scale globally is the fact that we have our entire platform on the cloud, and then we can go market by market and localize
I see. And I have one last question, if it's okay, if you have another couple of minutes.
it.
By the way, I forgot to tell you at the beginning, the Blockchain Rock, the name comes actually from, we got inspired by you. Because when you came to Gibraltar as part of the DLT application process, you put an hashtag Blockchain Rock, and that's where
Awesome.
the name of the podcast came through. I should have started with that, but to be fair, like, at the beginning, I was a bit like, I didn't know where to start. But yeah, so the last question is actually a theory, if you want, like that um, I, I don't know if it's of mine or just in my experience, when you're looking at entrepreneurs from Israel and the US, they tend to share the same risk savviness. Whereas when you look at entrepreneurs from from Europe, for example, there is a bit more of a conservative take to that. And I believe it comes down to how those two cultures sees failure. So I think that I lived in Israel for a good chunk of my life, and I lived in Italy for the rest. And in England, and I've seen that in Italy and in England, but I can speak more to the effect of Italy. When you fail as an entrepreneur, you're a failure. You have that label on, and it attaches to you. Now, I'm not sure if that's the case, or at least if that's the case, whether it plays to the same extent when it comes to the US and to Israel, because we've seen some of our clients, they come and they have, went bankrupt maybe once or twice. They had some project in the past, but it doesn't stop them from, keep attempting to innovate. And eventually a lot of them, learn from past mistake and come with extremely successful ideas. So do you think there is a difference in terms of like mindset? Do you?
Well, first of all, obviously, there's a very big culture difference between all cultures.
Yeah.
And we have 850 employees in 12 different offices. And we every day learn about those differences, the pros and cons of every culture. I think the beauty is really to try and sort of take the best, from what people are good at. And by the way, there are a lot of books, a lot of information around those differences in cultures. There's no doubt that the Israeli high tech ecosystem is very similar in mindset to what has become the Silicon Valley mentality,
Mhm.
which is sort of constantly deliver, get shit done, constantly innovate, find the shortest path to success. And if you think about like other industrial revolutions, where, for example, the Germans and Japanese were very, very, very good, is where they need everything to be very accurate and very planned and very consistent, which doesn't necessarily meet the same criteria as innovation. And somewhere where we see different innovators. So Chinese, by the way, are somewhat similar. They're also very, very good at replicating at high scale. UK is very good at sort of process oriented. That's why they're the center of financial services,
Mhm.
because everything has to be extremely highly organized and according to the sort of administrative process. So they have very good regulations. So
Like Italy,
every
they are very similar.
Italy have a great sense, in France, a great sense of product quality.
Mhm.
So food and fashion would be the best from Italians and French, right? So you can actually almost see what a country is good at, sort of related to the culture of that country. Now, when we're sort of living more and more in a global world, I think the best way is to try, first of all, for everybody in a company to sort of appreciate the difference in cultures and try to take the best from each other's culture. So I don't think it's, and there's a range of sort of, type of communication. How do you communicate with people? Is it effective communication? But there's definitely differences in culture. But again, this is also a generalization,
Yeah, of course.
which we Israelis are very good at. Kidding. But obviously, there are great entrepreneurs in the UK, and
Of
they're
course.
great,
Yeah.
and they're great process-oriented people in Israel, but when you think of a culture, you think about something that's sort of wider. I can tell you, like, we have really great people in all different offices, and we try to learn as much as possible of the benefits of every culture to the Toro family.
I see, Yoni. I think thank you so much for your time. I don't want to keep you much longer because I know you're a very busy person. If there is anything else you would like to add, please do.
No,
Otherwise,
perfect, and happy to join again. And thank you for having me. And great to know that I've inspired the name of the show.
the founder. Thanks so much again for giving us some time. I really appreciate it.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Bye.